Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, yesterday, we made our predictions as to what will take place during Biden's first press conference. And now, the day after, we will see how well or badly we did. I think we did quite well. I'll go first, and I'll say that my prediction is that the expectations were very low, and he managed to fulfill those expectations. He got through it. He didn't do anything catastrophic. He didn't collapse. He didn't fall asleep. He answered some questions with more or less relevantly than others, but after 62 minutes he was done. And 62 minutes may seem like a long time, but in fact, given how slowly he talked and all the pauses and ers and ums and and then the time it took for him to reflect on what the question asked him, 62 minutes wasn't really that long. Okay, Peter, what was your impression about your predictions?
Let me check here. Yeah. I wrote it down. So they gave it to me just.
Yeah. Okay. You're
all right.
Shuffling around among your briefing.
Maybe I left it in my pocket. Yes, everything we predicted. I predicted it would be a lot shorter, but I think your explanation is that he spoke very slowly. For what was amazing for me, these were all softball questions too. I mean, I didn't know what there was to think about.
Right.
Let's go to the substance. I will just say it. He was completely dishonest about what's going on at the border. I mean, deeply dishonest. Okay. And I'm really tired of blaming your predecessor. Okay. I mean, it's your job. Okay. I mean, and what he said about the Trump administration's immigration policy was wrong. It's simply not true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those facilities that they say weren't there, yes, because they weren't necessary because they changed the law. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
And this is the time of year when this surge comes. No, the surges are in May when there is one.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I was really disappointed that. I mean, he did get a little bit of pushback, but I think it was part of the kabuki theater. I think these journalists wanted to show that they would, like a breeze kind of push back a little bit, a lot like with a sledgehammer when Trump was in office. Okay.
Right.
Another thing that was really quite interesting is that he's got a real temper, doesn't he?
Well, that was already manifest during the election. He would get very annoyed in a nasty sort of way to questions that were perfectly legitimate. I mean, and that was with ordinary voters. I mean, the ordinary voters, he would start insulting them. Remember that guy? You challenged him to push-ups and then called him fat. He asked him a perfectly reasonable question, and he'd get very nasty. And he does that with reporters. So absolutely, yeah, he's got a nasty temper in a way that Trump never did that. Trump would always be. I mean, he was aggressive, had that New York rudeness about him, but there wasn't a real nastiness that Biden has.
And also, if we have a comparison, is a number of people were press people around Trump, script writers and all that. I mean, he, to one degree or another, would more or less present what was agreed to, but he would go off the reservation all of the time.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
He would go off on a tangent.
The classic of that was when he was asked a question about guns, and we thought, oh, this is a softball question, and it was a softball question. He's going to hit it out of the park. We need gun control, so on and so forth. But instead, he went off on a tangent about his infrastructure proposals that he's going to unveil the week after. Completely not irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, but that was really obvious. And when he was in the Senate 129 years ago, we said yesterday, stay away from numbers. and I'm glad you brought it up. I was very disappointed from a issue, an issue related way about the filibuster. Come on, Joe, you were in the Senate for a long time. If anyone knows anything about the filibuster, it's you. And the way he just kind of danced around it all, I was just really aghast. I mean, you would think of all things, he would have a backbone on that issue because that was his life.
Well, that's right, and then particularly as he seemed to subscribe to the idea that Jim Crow, that the filibuster is all part of the Jim Crow era. It's all Jim Crow. But then he said, okay, well, what about all these years, decades that Democrats used the filibuster when they were in the minority? So were they all Jim Crow adherents? Are they all racist? I mean, it was such an obvious point. I mean, again, reporters didn't push back and to say, hey, why is it only Jim Crow when the Republicans use it, but it's perfectly fine when the Democrats use it?
Well, Jim Crow comes from the democratically controlled South.
That's exactly, that's another point. That's always swept aside.
It just shows the lack of honesty, the lack of education of so many people in the press right now, because most people are not journalists, they're activists, okay? Right. So, I mean, it's like the Southern generals, the statues. The Democrats put them up, not Republicans, okay?
Right. No, that's right.
Jim Crow comes from the antebellum South, okay? I mean, all of these come from the Democrats. And
right. All of this, all of these people who are today kind of reviled, like politicians like George Wallace and
Byrd,
and all of those people, we're all Democrats. I mean, anyone in the South who wanted to get any kind of elective office in the South was a Democrat. I mean, the Republican Party just didn't even exist in the South.
That's why FDR made so many compromises. Okay, so and also essentially, and this is not a hard and fast rule, so I don't want to be held to it. But essentially, what is evolved in the Senate is that the Senate. The House of Representatives is a far more competitive environment. It's a winner take all type thing. In the Senate, it's more deliberative. I mean, if you want the easiest gig in politics, become a U.S. Senator. You do not work very hard at all. Okay, you very rarely really vote on really important things. Very rarely, and I'm not counting about voting for cabinet secretaries and stuff like that. I mean, that's just the machinery of government, ambassadors and stuff like that. But when it comes to real legislation, important legislation, it acts rarely. And I tend to believe, because look, I can see how Democrats are frustrated. Yes, I understand it. Okay, I do. With Kamala Harris, you do have that one vote to push things through. I get it. But what happens, for example, in 2 years, it flips.
But that's exactly right. And that's what's interesting about this, because there's a perfectly legitimate argument that you can make for ending the filibuster. You say, okay, we've got the majority. Let's just make use of our majority. That's fine. But the point is that these politicians, they're kind of used to not doing anything because they say, can't do it. Sorry, filibuster. I mean, Mitch McConnell, he made a whole practice of doing that. I mean, whenever he was pushed by his Republican caucus, hey, we want this legislation, we want the wall and so on. Can't do it, I'm afraid, filibuster. So, once the Democrats end the filibuster, if that does happen, then McConnell isn't going to have any more excuses. When he becomes the majority in 2 years' time, 4 years' time, he's going to be pressed. Okay, now let's enact our agenda, and he won't have that excuse. So that's why, of course, McConnell is fighting ferociously for the filibuster, because it becomes an excuse for him to do nothing, and just to use the filibuster as his excuse for doing nothing.
Yeah, but if you look, down the road here, you may rue the day that you got rid of the filibuster.
Oh yeah, okay? Yeah, no question, absolutely. That's exactly right. I mean, it was the same with the remember with the nuclear option, with the the confirming of the judges. Okay, the Democrats got rid of it, boom, and then of course the Republicans made use of the nuclear option and they got their people onto the bench. So that's right. But I mean, going back to your point about the his lies on the immigration was, I mean, it was staggering. I mean, all of the
Staggering.
things he said. I mean, for instance, when he said something like, um, uh, Trump would push children across the border so that they could just starve to death. That's not what he did. I mean, the children would come, they would be put on a plane, flown back to where they came from. It's not that complicated. I mean, you don't allow them in. You put them on a plane and they go back. And when he said, well, and then he said, oh, we're not letting the families in. We're turning away families. Untrue. That actually, even the media, some media fact checker said that actually isn't true. The families are not being turned back. So you cross border illegally. It's basically catch and release. I mean, they're still practicing the catch and release policy of the Obama years. And and the interesting thing is that he said nothing, not one thing there that he intends to do to deal with the border crisis. Instead he started rambling about, oh, my ancestors, they came here because they were driven out by the Brits. I mean, leave aside the fact that he's now offended his closest allies, the British. But again, essentially, you're saying, okay, come on over. We understand you. I mean, so
yeah, but that message hasn't changed. It's basically come on. Okay,
right,
that's
exactly.
I mean, for all of the rhetoric and bluster that Trump didn't work with our allies and stuff like that, on his immigration policy, he got South America, Central America on his side, right. And all the players were on board. Right. I mean, it worked.
Right.
I mean, another thing that Trump never would have gotten away with, but Biden is that this transparency issue. I mean, this is just befuddling to me.
Right.
We got to fix it before we can show you. I mean, that's
a good one. Yeah. We can't show you right now because it'd be too embarrassing, but we'll show it to you when we've managed to address these embarrassing things.
What if Trump said that?
I know. It's a classic, like which a government saying, well, we're not going to reveal anything to you at the moment because it's really so embarrassing that we're going to keep it quiet. But when we've actually sorted all this out, then we'll open up. Manage to sweep everything under the rug, then we'll open it up.
Okay. Another thing, because I'm going to push back a little bit from the Fox News coverage. I watched it my morning because of the hours difference. The COVID issue, I think, is cogent, but that it kind of works against what a lot of conservatives have been saying, that it doesn't really impact children very much. So I think that's kind of overblown there. I think that just a general health issue should be taken in consideration. Okay, I mean, healthcare from these poor countries is, in many cases, non-existent. Okay, and you're walking through a desert that is hostile. There's molestation going on against children. I mean, these people are very prone to may have infectious diseases. So I wouldn't push the corona thing as hard as some people are, but in general, I would, who are these people? What are their physical?
Well, that's it. Well, that's exactly it, and that goes to the heart of the question of the border. I mean, there is a reason why countries have border controls, because you want to know who are these people, and public health is definitely an issue. Particularly at the time of a global pandemic. You can't scare people by this. Oh, Trump did this terrible thing. He didn't take the pandemic seriously, and in the meantime, you're just allowing in people. You know who they are. And meanwhile, while others, Americans can't come back to America without undergoing very rigid tests
and quarantine, and
falls right in.
And quarantine after that.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
exactly. I mean, one of the messaging here that really falls on its face is that, as you even if you're watching, let's say CNN and MSNBC, God forbid, but a lot of people do, unfortunately, not as many as before, but putting these people into hotels. I mean, when's the last time you've been in a hotel?
Exactly.
When's the last time somebody paid your plane ticket to go somewhere?
That's right.
And of all countries in the world, the healthcare issue, where it is so scarce for tens of millions of people in the United States, and it's a freebie for people that are illegally breaking the law. I don't care. You can call me whatever you want. It's breaking the law. And as we've said before, you can't have an immigration policy if you don't have a border. Come on, you have to have one to have the other.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, you imagine trying to break the law at an airport where you have passport control and everything. Boom. I mean, you know, you will be apprehended so quickly, and your head hitting the concrete in no time, and you'll be thrown into prison. So
I'll tell you, it was a few years ago. I was going to France, and I was getting out of the airport in Nice, and all of a sudden, somebody started touching me, and I was like, well, I was really quite startled, and I was gonna really, whack, what are you doing? And then my senses came in and said, maybe this guy is border control or something like that. And he was frisking me, and I said, what are you doing? And I pushed him back, and he said, standard random. And I just thought, I gotta hold my temper, because I'm gonna end up in a holding cell here, okay?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So Biden flat out lied on the immigration, tried to blame everything on Trump, and clearly doing nothing to address the problem. I mean, saying, oh, he's going to build more facilities for migrants. We're going to have more beds. The moment you say that, then of course you're right away inviting them to come in and just saying, okay, hey, we're going to have more beds, more facilities available for you. Well, again, come on over. And interesting, there was a question asked by one of the reporters about this, about a young boy, an unaccompanied boy who came across, and then the mother of that boy was asked, and then the mother, well, yeah, I sent him there because Biden says come on over, and it's going to be a way for us to come and join him. Well, that's the whole point. That's why the children are coming, because once they're here, then they duly make their appeal for their parents to come and join.
Can't say it, but anchor, immigration.
That's it. That's the point. Yeah, exactly. So again, go ahead.
What is it? I mean, I'm curious what you think about this, because if you look at the entire political career of Joe Biden, he's basically a liberal Republican in the large scheme of things. Where does this come from, George? Who's telling him this? Where is he getting these marching orders? For me, I have a really hard time that he's vested in these issues. Right. It comes out of nowhere. It comes out of nowhere if you look at the scheme of his entire political career.
Right. I mean, it's a possibility that, and again, we're just speculating, that he wants to outdo Obama, and somehow, oh, look, I've done a lot more than Obama did. I mean, there's a touch of the LBJ. LBJ, he was a conservative Democrat. He was a Southern conservative Democrat, but he also had an idea. He wants to outdo JFK. He wants to show, I can do so much more than JFK did, and he went far beyond anything that JFK envisaged.
JFK haunted Lyndon Johnson's presidency. Particularly if you keep in mind is that he kept the Kennedy team around him for quite a long time. And he's trying to prove to them, because you have to remember, he went to some kind of teacher's college, okay? That's where his education.
Unlike Harvard, which is where JFK
Harvard or Yale, okay, which he was, I mean, David Halberstam came up with the best and the brightest for a reason, okay? But of course, we know now in retrospect, just because you're accredited and and you've been to the best schools and you know how to, drink the right wine and use the right fork, doesn't mean you're going to screw up the country because you can.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And because absolutely right. I mean, is that Johnson, of course, screwed himself over by keeping all of the JFK crowd around him, who had no loyalty to him. Their loyalty was to JFK. And John Connally, who was the former governor of Texas, a Johnson man. I mean, he said to him from the beginning, "You're committing political suicide by keeping these people on. Bring your own people in." But, Johnson didn't. And so again, it was some deep sort of insecurity.
Well, I mean, the intelligence community rolled JFK into Vietnam, and Johnson inherited it. Okay, And Nixon had to, spend so much political capital to get out, and in the process of committing atrocities like the illegal invasion of Cambodia. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean that's only if we knew then what we know now is that just because they have, they have this, pedigree to them.
But they're all.
It should tell you, get rid of them. Okay.
Yeah, no, these are all pedigreed. I mean, when you go through that name, all those names, Mac Bundy and McNamara. I mean, these are all extraordinary. Dean Rusk. I mean, these are all had the best schools, and they had big jobs at these best schools. I mean, Rostow. They were professors at Harvard and MIT, and so. But again, doesn't mean you're not going to screw up. And in fact, chances are good that you will screw up. So I think, just going back to your question, I think that either Obama is calling the shots,
which could likely,
or there is something, because I'm also puzzled like you are as to where is this coming from. This was not the Biden that we had been accustomed to.
Well, I mean, do you want to die on? Is this the hill you want to die on? 60 days in or something. Is this the hill you want to die on? I find it bewildering. I mean, this is self-inflicted. All of this is self-inflicted.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
And what it does is it sucks the oxygen out too. I mean, to be fair, I mean, it's gotten to the particularly when we'll show you when we want to show you. I mean, even the lamest, dumbest liberal journalist at CNN is going to say, "What are they hiding? What's going on?" Because the CNNs of the world, the MSNBCs, the Washington Post, they need clicks. Okay, they're in trouble. Their business model is in trouble with Trump gone. That's right. Okay, they got to do something here, yep. And we'll show you when we want to show you. I mean, that's a cover up in my mind. I'd look at it at least. Okay,
it was an extraordinary statement. But there were other extraordinary aspects to it. He was asked about Afghanistan, and then he pretty much said the May the 1st deadline is a non-starter, but we will be leaving. Don't worry, we will be leaving. It's not a question of if, but a question of when.
Mark my words, they missed that May 1st deadline, and they will, and it will have shown us that Biden was rolled. And it will continue ad infinitum. It's done. However long the Biden administration, Biden-Harris, Harris-Biden, whatever you want to call it, whatever the duration of this administration, we will be in Afghanistan. Mark my word. They had the chance. They had one chance.
That's right. Because there was only one condition that was underlay that agreement with the Taliban. The Taliban does not attack U.S. servicemen. The Taliban has adhered to that agreement. There was no conditionality about the coalition government and all that. Those were desirable things, that there would be a coalition government ruling Afghanistan. But that wasn't the condition to ensure American withdrawal. Biden bringing this issue up of the coalition government and so on essentially means the war goes on. I mean, that's it. The war goes on. There's not going to be a kind of some sort of an agreement or magically within 3 months. Hey, let's get a coalition government and we'll let bygones be bygones.
No one thought about that during 20 years, really?
Exactly. Yeah.
No. The interesting
good idea. Let's have I didn't think of that. Why?
Looking at some of the lamestream media, Iran has links with the Taliban. The Russians are talking with the Taliban. Well, of course they are, because they're a reality there. The American-backed, NATO-backed government is a money-making mirage. Okay, I mean, we're talking helicopters, Saigon, 1975. Okay,
right. Oh, well, that's it. And so essentially, what Biden has done is guaranteed permanent presence. I mean, because sooner rather than later, someone's going to come into the Oval Office and say, "Wait, this is a disaster. We need more American troops.
Need more troops.
Yeah, we need more troops." I think they're about.
No. Even the Afghan study group, I think it is, which is a complete sham. Okay, they like to bipartisan and all that. No, I mean, they want to stay because it's a good grift. But even they admitted And this was during Trump's second impeachment process. And so no one paid attention to it. Even they said, if American troops are not withdrawn by May 1st, you're going to have to send in more troops that are now to protect them.
That's exactly right. And that's an interesting aspect. I mean, after all, that Trump, who was just sort of fighting, enemies everywhere, and the key people he was fighting were the national security state, and they really did in Trump. But they hated this agreement with Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Trump did not have them under control. I mean, look, the people under Nixon, this is again an underreported aspect of Watergate. I mean, the national security state hated Nixon's policy. They didn't like his withdrawal from Vietnam policy. They didn't like his détente policy. They didn't like his arms control policy, and they resisted. They fought ferociously against him, which again, and that contributed greatly to Watergate. And
but the interesting things, if we're going to go down that rabbit hole, which I am quite happy to do, is that but Nixon had around him some really good hands. Some of them were dirty, but good hands that knew how things worked. See, this was the problem that Trump had. He just didn't have people. I mean, where was his legislative genius? How to work the Senate, how to work the House, and get this and throw in that law and all that. He just didn't have anybody around him. And I fault him for that. He needed a whiz kid or whiz girl or whatever, whiz, around him to be able to do that, because McConnell wasn't going to be the guy. Right?
No, that's right.
Paul Ryan wasn't going to be the guy.
No, that's right. So these people cheerfully lied to Trump about Syria. They lied to him about Afghanistan. And that's it. I mean, in the end, because Trump didn't have, he needed, whatever. He needed some kind of a kitchen cabinet around him who said, hey, this stuff that's coming from the Pentagon or the CIA is absolute BS. Don't.
Yeah, what he needed was 10 McGregors around him all of the time.
Right. No, that's it.
And that's why they got rid of Flynn. I've said it here before.
McGregor, Flynn, Rand Paul, Stephen Cohen, Mearsheimer. He needed people around him, like they said. Don't fall for the CIA BS. They've been playing this game for decades. Don't fall for it.
Another one, I'm holding paper here, and was one of the most disturbing parts of the depressor, as I call it, okay? North Korea. You notice how he just read a text?
Yes, again, you read that.
That was, wow, for me.
Good.
Okay? Because it shows that he doesn't have any thoughts about it. His administration isn't taking it seriously.
Right.
And if someone is taking it seriously, Joe doesn't know much about it, okay? This is what we really worried about. I think it's happening here. Right. But the fact is something of that importance that he just had to read a pre-prepared, I mean, he literally just read it.
Right. That's right. That he read that. And again, he has no ideas about it. And that's an important issue. I mean, it was one that Trump invested something in it. He didn't follow through on it, but nonetheless, Trump was on the right lines, namely that if you are going to, to address the North Korean problem means you have to move towards normalizing relations with North Korea. You can't make normalization conditional on North Korean disarmament. And if you're going down that path, you're going to fail just like every other president.
It is such an anomalous, abnormal situation. And so that means you have to do anomalous and abnormal things. Get out of this cul-de-sac that goes around and around and around. And we've seen it with repeated administrations. Trump going to the DMZ was brilliant. The problem is, who was his National Security Council advisor? Right. My God, I mean, that was a brilliant move. I know left and right, they just tear into him on that. I think it was a brilliant move.
Right, okay. No, absolutely. And, and the original agreement that they signed in Singapore was an agreement along the right lines and stated explicitly that it's going to be a step-by-step process. The goal is, yes, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but there's a step-by-step process of normalizing relations, signing a peace treaty, and proper economic trading relationships. Then, when you created that basis of trust, then denuclearization is feasible. But that's not, then but Trump was, of course, attacked by, the left and right. Oh my God, he's selling out. He's selling out North Korea. Oh God, he's being run around the ring by this terrible regime. And it went nowhere. But Trump was on the right lines. Biden is just mouthing, cliches. He has no idea what he's going to do.
If you really want to go back to the origins of this nonsense, Lawrence Wilkerson was interviewed by the Gray Zone. I think it was by Aaron Mate. And Larry Wilkerson was in the Bush Jr. administration. And he gives a step-by-step account of how the U.S. actually never had any intention of following through on resolving this very dangerous situation on the Korean Peninsula. Go and take a look at it. And it's really, for me, it was really amazing because he was there, okay? And how there was this really, and it was, again, because they didn't want the national security state. So it doesn't matter what party you're in. They didn't want to see the president succeed because they know, because they were all Vindmans. Okay?
Right, that's right. But that's the thing. I mean, and here we get to the real issue is that you have the national security state firmly in charge. Their prerogatives were challenged, not always effectively by Trump. And now they have the ideal figure at the head of the government. Is there somebody who's not going to give them any trouble at all? Mr. President, we need to boost forces in Afghanistan. I'm with you. Mr. President, we have to get tough with North Korea. I'm with you. We got to deal with Putin right now. He's a killer. I'm with you. That's it. They have the perfect president. This is what they wanted. And I think that's why they want to keep Biden in that job. And Harris, I don't think I have any problem with
4 more years.
That's it.
No, I think you saw it. I thought it was a brilliant commentary, Mark Stein on Tucker. He basically said is that the national security state, just as you were saying, has their perfect guy because the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is vacant.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
It's vacant. He's the perfect cutaway for what they want. Particularly, I mean, just on that one issue here. Look, the tug of war over the border. Okay, that's time honored in American politics. Okay, but when it comes to these other things that are very, very dangerous, and to have someone so passive.
Yes.
For better or worse. I mean, Trump. My goodness, he invested so much capital in the North Korean situation, and it was squandered because of the people around him and because of his lack of persistence. I fault him on that.
Right. No, I think so. I mean, you can fault him also on his failure of to launching a détente with Russia. He clearly intended it. I mean, if you watch his performance at Helsinki, it's clear that his intent to have that conference with Putin in Helsinki was to launch a policy of détente. He was thrown off kilter by the national security state, and he didn't really resist. And that was a major failure.
What do you think would have happened if he had, in early days, by executive order, signed off on a commission and had Stephen Cohen head of the commission?
Right.
What do you think?
No, absolutely. That's exactly what he should have. He should have a commission, and he should have done it right away. A proper, bipartisan commission with people like Stephen Cohen who would look into the 2016 election, not you just simply rely on what John Brennan and his cohort has to say. Of course, they're going to come up with this nonsense. So yeah, that was the failure on Trump's part. But his instincts were right. I mean, he said, just because the CIA comes in and tells me this, I'm not going to believe it.
The CIA couldn't predict the end of the Soviet Union. Right. The CIA said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Right. I could go on and on and on.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I think his instincts were right, which is exactly a political leader. He gets advice from experts, whether it's the CIA, the Pentagon, or whatever, and said, okay, I've heard what you have to say. I don't agree with you. I just don't. I think you have an agenda of your own, and you're trying to roll me. And I think that's what a leader does. I mean, he doesn't become a prisoner of the quote experts unquote. Biden is the exact opposite of that. Oh, I have to follow the science. I have to follow the experts. That's what you get.
it tells us everything about the Flynn story, because, you know, he was telling Trump that this is not a briefing. They're not telling us what's going on. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, they're
And
not
that's why
telling
they
us.
nixed him right away.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. They're not telling us, and they're in fact spying on us. This briefing was a fake. They weren't actually telling us anything. They were really spying on us. That's exactly right.
So to kind of wrap up here, I think we ended yesterday's video by saying it'll be in the eye of the beholder. And so for the liberal mainstream media, he passed the test at the lowest possible bar. And then you had conservatives. I don't really consider someone like Sean Hannity a conservative. I think he's a fanatic, okay? But we obviously got an hour of how dreadful it was from that perspective. But so it was in the eye of the beholder. You and I obviously have talked about these things, but from an issue point of view, I was very dissatisfied. Where were the fact checkers when you needed it? Right. Throwing little temper tantrums like granddad does, okay, get off the grass type attitude. Right. And
right.
then
I think that's a very good point about these temper tantrums, because these temper tantrums seem to be quite effective with journalists, because they back off. Now, you know, if the journalists had any integrity, they wouldn't back off. You know, they wouldn't be impressed by a temper tantrum. Yeah, well, you know, so what? I don't care whether you're losing your temper. You know,
yeah, but with Trump, when they saw the veins starting to pulsate in the eyes, they go, mission accomplished.
Right. One should also say that the performance of the reporters was absolutely disgraceful. I mean, there was the woman from NPR who said, well, they're coming here because they think you're a nice guy. The reporter who asked him this idiotic question about, do you intend to run in 2024? I mean, I've never heard any president within the first few months of his presidency being asked, do you intend to run in the next election cycle? Well, what do you expect him to say? Oh, why are you wasting everyone's time?
Remember on WhatsApp last night, I said, it looks like a wake. Remember before it started?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and then when it got started, it was self-licking ice cream cones.
That's it. Yeah. All right. Well, you know, I think we're going to have to wait quite a while before we get another press conference. All right. Thank you, Peter. We are on Rumble. Please look us up on Rumble, and we will be back. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. That's it. Well done, Peter. See you soon. Bye.